Paranormal Karen, she's so spooky. Paranormal Karen, funny too. Paranormal Karen, she's so spooky. Oh, and did I mention she's funny too? Yeah, cha-cha-cha.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to Paranormal Karen. A couple things really quick. Super excited about my guest today. I am just over COVID, so if I'm a little brain foggy, that is what it is. Maybe you'll be like, Karen, there's no difference between brain fog and regular you, so we hope so. Also, real quick, everybody, join my Patreon at Patreon.com/Rontowski. There's tarot classes, psychic classes, and of course, this podcast extension there where you get 2 a week, and the series What's Going On in Utica, which is a little bit of how I came to my guest today, Michael Wann. Michael, how are you?
I am doing well, Karen. How are you?
I am great.
Besides the brain fog, and I'm going to agree with the second thing you said, because I don't think an idea like brain fog is such like a nebulous idea that when you throw it out at the people, like, oh yeah, you're going to get brain fog. It's like saying I'm fatigued. I'm like, well, I don't really know what that. It's so general that everyone can easily apply it to themselves. And I don't think you've ever had brain fog, or what you think of your normal stance. Like that's always brain foggy. No matter what, there's no change. And that's the way I see you, at least.
Well, thank you. I work as a comedian. In fact, I'm getting ready to go out on the road again. And it's interesting because, on stage, you talking to the audience and thinking quick and this and that. And I'm waiting for that to come back because I kind of feel like my funny app has not reconnected yet. It's coming up and it's getting better, but that's what I'm talking about, is thinking quickly and also being able to focus for a long period of time. But that's why I'm so excited about today's subject. In fact, I want to tell you why my friend Mark Potus told me to get a hold of you. So you're in Pennsylvania, I believe, correct?
You are correct.
Okay. So I had to move from LA to upstate New York to Utica, and I started a sort of subset podcast because this area is so whatever, haunted, mystical, so much going on here. And so far, I think I've only done 3 or 4 episodes, and yet still finding endless amounts of material. And there was a lady I knew here that went to a big retreat, and it was some shaman from all over the world, and the retreat was up at Lake George. And he said there was some sort of conversation that took place where he said, I'm not supposed to say this because everybody gets mad when you say one area or the other, but the reason the retreat is here is because this is one of the most powerful areas on the planet. So as I'm trying to put together all these things of what does that mean, and why is the true crime up here in Utica so brutal, and why were there so many battles and the hauntings are so bad, they're not even human hauntings, Mark tells me about you. Now, you're working a little bit south, not quite upstate New York, but he was telling me a story that you talk about, I'm going to hack this name, about the Susquehanna River?
Yes, Susquehanna.
Okay, so tell me first, how did you sort of end up on your journey that brought you to me? How has your life unfolded in that strange way to bring this topic to us?
Okay. I'm still mentally hooked onto the first part of your question when you're talking about the area and the shaman and
Oops, I lost you there.
So let me refocus. So how did I get involved with the Susquehanna River? So no different than any other person, I'm just me. And I see the world the way I see it, just like each person sees the world the way they see it. And the way I see it is I like to I'm curious, and I like to continue to go down to the bottom of wherever my curiosity is naturally focused. And my curiosity is always, and this is also very true to the human being, your curiosity should be focused to something which is really connected to you as an individual. I'm curious about the things of my life. Mm-hmm. And so I found myself I found myself at a very interesting like turn, kind of like probably you felt when you moved from Los Angeles to New York. You're like, okay, my life just took a turn, and now I'm here, and let me get my bearings.
Mhm.
And I found myself living on this tiny little river town in south central Pennsylvania on the Susquehanna River, and it started with like just like the most basic, like what I'll call like Wikipedia type question, because Wikipedia refers to a type of consciousness. It's like, hey, I'm curious about something, but I'm really not that curious. I just want to know like in Wikipedia.
Yeah.
And so, and which is totally fine. Like there's no competitions. It's only like, be honest with where and what you are, and then you understand your bearings. So I'm like, I started with a Wikipedia curiosity. I'm like, well, what's the Susquehanna River? I find myself here, blah, 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 Wikipedia, Susquehanna, and next thing you know, I was pulled into a vortex of synchromistic experiences, which completely like is great fodder for story, but really like the perfect vehicle if to really live through, what this collectively we've seen the last couple of years in, which is a total change in reality.
Mhm.
And that was tied into what the Susquehanna River was and is, and how it tied into my life, and more or less where I am right now. So that's kind of like purposefully vague, but that's where I'm gonna return it back to you.
Okay.
So allow you to ask me where to go deeper with that.
Yes, and so I'm going to reset that a bit. When we talk here about reality changing right now, so I'm assuming you're a woo-woo person like us. What do you perceive that as your intuition getting stronger, as everything? I always say the definition of woke, people don't realize the definition of woke was realizing that you've been lied to all your life. Like, would you say...
Right.
So that woke experience of, hey, everything doesn't add up, and I think I have to find out on my own.
Right. Okay. So how was it that you phrased the first part of the question? You said specifically, this is what you said. So I think you're a woo-woo person like me, or something along that. So to me, this is what I am. Like, I am someone who is curious and open-minded.
Okay.
And so let me finish this. So that takes me wherever it takes me, and then it must be demonstratable. And so if it's not demonstratable, that doesn't mean that I reject something. It means I'm like, okay, this is just not in a state of demonstratable. But that being said, I am fully with the understanding that I've been lied to my entire life. So it's like, you really got to friggin' demonstrate. So I'm very comfortable standing at this line of, I know it's a mystery. I don't necessarily need to solve the mystery, but I recognize there's that, and I want to understand exactly where and what I'm in, and how this realm works in a demonstratable way. And I'm not interested in abstract concept if it does not translate into something which is tangible or beneficial to me in a very, very real way.
Okay.
So that's kind of how I navigate. So I've very much my feet on the ground, but very, very much like every single idea out there. Like, I've studied it, I've looked at it, I played with it, I want to know more about it. And if I think it's a bunch of bullshit, I'm like, it's a bunch of bullshit. And I'll tell you why I think that.
Okay, and I exactly what you describe right there is what used to be called a skeptic. I believe that now when someone says they're a skeptic, they're usually a denier, and there's no flexibility, there's no curiosity.
Like James Randi. James Randi changed the definition of what skeptic means in the collective consciousness, because he always came like, yeah, he's open-minded, but he came with like, no, that was part of like the edge of like, kind of like going counterculture against like real curiosity. Yes. At least in my opinion, that's how I see that as part of like the shaping of the collective narrative.
Yes, I agree with that. Okay, so let's get back. So now let's bounce back. So you're living in this new place. And by the way, what is your trade, your regular trade or job or career of choice?
Professional weirdo.
I love it.
I've done it all. I have worked like up until age 30. I was on a very, very like from a corporate position. I was like in a great place with a great career ahead of me in the technology space, working on the infrastructure level of what we now think of as the internet and the cloud in the DC area. And then I walked away from that and I did stuff like with like kind of like had a foot on kind of like a sovereign freedom world, but also like really straddled in mainstream world, like, you know, mortgage and like being well taken care of by that world. And then that started shifting even more and more. And maybe around 2012, I have been drifting even more and more towards a nebulous way in which I kind of like make my way. And now I'm just literally professional, full-time weirdo. And what I mean by that is it doesn't fit into a box.
Perfect.
I do a lot of what people would say is astrology, but I think of it as unastrology, you know, because I'm sure I'm trying to help people navigate between like where the pitfalls are and where is the demonstratable, like, you know, the truth and the mystery. And so that's kind of where I find myself meeting people in all sorts of different ways, like professionally meeting them in ways to help them navigate their own sort of like what their life is with the understanding you and I are talking about, which is like, you know, I recognize that I don't know nothing, but at least I know how to ask good questions.
Right. Okay, great. Okay. So you end up moving to the river. What are some of the synchronicities? What are some of the things that start happening that make you go, okay, wait a minute.
All right. So now it's going to get good because, like, I sound all serious and all like, okay.
Oh, no, you're doing
so
great.
now we're going to get into the friggin' strange.
All right.
Because I've always been strange. I've always been fascinated by magic, secret societies, psychology, NLP, subliminals, like, you know, dark psychology, magic, ancient, you know, all that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Like I've got a PhD in it. Like I loved it. I studied it like it was my job for like 15, 20 years. And then like it became my life. So I move out to Susquehanna and I go and I look on the Wikipedia. And then it only takes about a minute. Until you see that the Susquehanna River is connected to John Smith. Do you know who the John Smith is? When I say John Smith, do you know who he is?
No, I do not. I know that's a Mormon person, maybe.
I mean, like, so this is what, like, because I heard you refer, like, you know, you're strong in terms of, like, you know, the a telepathic connection with human beings. So you just telepathically, like, read into it. So, like, John Smith really doesn't have anything to do with Mormon, but this goes exactly to Joseph Smith, which does have to do with Mormon. So you're absolutely right, but you're absolutely not right. So, like, you picked up something. You picked up that connection in my head.
So the psychic part is working, but the brain fog is still getting the names.
However we want to define it, doesn't matter. This is an art form. It's not a science. All right? And we're having fun with it. As soon as you lose that tickle, like you've lost it. Then they've like taken it. So we laugh at ourselves. All right. So do you know who Pocahontas is?
Yes.
Do you remember who Pocahontas is?
It's Elizabeth Warren. Elizabeth Warren. No, I'm just kidding. Yes, go ahead. But go ahead, give us a review. Tell us about
Pocahontas. Is her like the whole story was Pocahontas, that she falls in love with the Englishman. And who was the Englishman? It was John Smith.
Ah, okay.
Right? And so that, like, in the back of everyone's mind, unless, like, that's your thing, unless, like, you really, like I've studied the historical history of the establishment of the colonial system of Britain into the new, like, if you've done that, you know you're John Smith and you know you're Pocahontas. But 99% of America, they're like, I kind of know that, and I'm pretty certain I know that from a cartoon from Disney.
Right. You're right.
And so So most people, like, they think like it's all about, like, it's literally creating a Seinfeld episode in everyone's mind where they kind of think they know something, but they don't. It's like a Seinfeld TV episode. Like, it kind of has a narrative to an overall show, but then, like, each thing it's like a dream. You wake up, you have it, and it ends, and you're like, what happened? So what that is an archetype. And so when you can go and tell storytelling in the same way, you're tapping into someone's, like, what, from an astrology perspective, their Neptune mind. And so that's what they do with history. And so John Smith is a key part in history because he is the leader of Jamestown Colony, which is the first of the colonies which started what became the United States of America, but it also began what then became the British Empire. They were both birthed under this, like, brand name of John Smith. Okay. And so when you look at the Susquehanna River, you see that there's this thing that connects John Smith. It's called the John Smith Map of Virginia. It was the first map. So picture the map of whatever that is, of what we now think of as the Mid-Atlantic. And it came out in 1612 and was used for about 100 years and was the primary way of navigating, let's say, what we think of the mid-Atlantic states. And you can see it's of the Chesapeake Bay and the Susquehanna River and, like, Pennsylvania, New York, and Maryland, and all this sort of stuff. And I'm looking at it. I'm like, okay, that's kind of interesting. And because I've studied and have been interested, because I have been raised in Generation X, because I was conditioned through both Scooby-Doo, that hit me no, that's exactly what it is. It was taught you to be conspiratorial and mystical at the same time. Every Scooby-Doo episode, which everyone of a certain age frame had watched over and over and over again, like, it conditions the mind to have a conspiratorial
to be a meddling kid.
Right, to be that, but that's in the background of your developmental mind as they hit you up with In Search Of, and then the time life, and then a little bit later in your developmental time to be like Time Life, like, the mysteries of the unknown, whatever that was called. So, like, I was conditioned like everyone else for that. So when I go and I'm looking at this, or I've done, like, my history, I've read my Manly P. Hall, I know how the Rosicrucians operate, and I quickly go and see the company which is behind James Smith or John Smith in Jamestown, or the Rosicrucians, and I know how they hide secret messages in maps. I'm like, okay, I'm going to look at this up close because I've been trained for this. Like, this is literally happening in my life. Like, I've read about it, and then I'm curious, and I see this map, and I'm looking at it, and I see the most undeniable indication. Like, there's a secret history. There's a secret message on this map. Okay. Which is tied into, like, some of the most important people in our history. That doesn't mean that it's true or not. It means that the people who wrote the history included this. That's the only thing I can say with 100% certainty, that they want me to know this name. And I go and I see that, and I'm like, holy crackers. And it's got a, like, what else are you going to hide in a map? But you're going to hide a location, and it's a cross reference. It is a crosshair. And this is what, like, this is my starting point. This is my hypothesis. I'm not saying that this is true. I'm saying, like, there's enough of a smoking gun to point me to this conclusion. I'm going to form it as a question, and then I'm going to go and test it. And so what that location was the 40th parallel in the Susquehanna River. And I'm like, all right, I'm in business. I don't know nothing about no parallels, but I do know where the Susquehanna River is because I'm finding myself right on it. And life brought me here at this really, really interesting time. And now let me go and look where 40th parallel is. Let me go put that in the computer box that they forced me to have to live with. And I type it in. And I'm like, okay, where's the 40th parallel? And the Susquehanna River. And I go and I look at it. And guess who literally lives right there?
You.
Me.
Wow. Okay. And I'm going to review this real quick before we go to a break. So you go through all this, you find this information in the map, you're reading everything, and then you find you live right on sort of the magic spot, shall we call it?
So suddenly I'm in the game. You are exactly right. So it's like I'm doing this from afar. I'm like, wow, that's kind of interesting. Look at this. Look at this. Like my curiosity, like I went from like being interested in the Susquehanna River, and then I saw this map and I start looking into this map, and like, I'm just kind of like, I'm just like kind of allowing this curiosity to naturally unfold. And then all of a sudden it got real personal real fast, because I'm not only do I find this thing where I can't, and this is how you know, go and look in the map. If you're a listener,
I have it open
stop
right now.
go, and if you look on the top line, and like maybe you'll have to blow it up because you're gonna have to be able to see detail. You're gonna see numbers. Like it's going to be in the top inch of it. Tell me when you see those numbers.
Okay, and I'm gonna, you know what? I'm looking at it right now, and I'm coming in. I got it on my Google machine, and because also, does this river go? When I was looking up while you were talking, does it go all the way up to New York?
Oh, girl, the deeper you go into the mystery, the more and more you're going to be scratching your head. You know how the kids always like to write the WTF, and they put the question marks, and then they put like that smiley face, or like maybe scratching the head. Like you're literally going to do this. So so I'm going to just tell you two more things which I found in my exploration. So so I'm going to answer your question first. So yes, the river begins right in Cooperstown, New York.
Okay.
Like at the transition from what's known as Glimmerglass Lake, it then at the bottom, which is known as Council Rock, which is a ancient holy space for the where they tell us the Iroquois Nation. Like there's a sign that says like this is where the Confederacy, this is where the elders met at Council Rock, and it's also where the Baseball Hall of Fame is. It's all right there. And then when you go and you start to like scratch your finger into like who and what is behind the Baseball Hall of Fame, you're like, what? And so that's one thing. Like that in itself is a 2-hour conversation. I've gone up and done quite a few presentations in New York who just want to hear that like Baseball Hall of Fame and connection and all this. But here's the other thing. The Susquehanna now the you're going to want to, I'm going to use this in a little bit of a purposeful hyperbole, because you can't exactly prove what I'm saying, but it is like in the bullseye of exactly what I'm saying. The Susquehanna River is the oldest river that's still flowing on the planet. The oldest river.
Okay.
For whatever that means, this is the oldest river, and at its source, they put the Baseball Hall of Fame, and at its mouth, because here's the other thing, the Susquehanna River and the Chesapeake Bay are the same body of water. They just changed form at Havre de Grace, Maryland, which happens to be where the very first computer is.
Okay, and I'm going to tell you this, and then you know what? Hold on, we're going to take a break, and then we come back. I'm going to tell you exactly what I'm looking at on the map, and you can tell us all, so we can look and be right on the same page.
Yes, because yes.
Okay, hang on, folks. We'll be right back.
Many people are unaware just how much hypnotherapy can help them, or think it's only to help lose weight or quit smoking. But there is so much more hypnotherapy can do. It can help with stress, anxiety, insomnia, phobias, performance enhancement, connecting with your spirit guides and higher self. You can even discover past lives and your life between lives. Heal traumas, break habits, find your deepest truth, or just have fun discovering who you really are, all from the comfort of your home. I'm Monique Pliakis. I'm a certified hypnotherapist, and I want to help you. Schedule a free consult by going to www.innerstandingshypnosis.com. That's INNERSTANDINGSHYPNOSIS.com. Innerstandings Hypnosis. Find your power and ignite your inner light.
All right, we're back. Okay, so I have punched this up in my little Google machine, and it gives, of course, one red dot where this is where it is, which obviously it's a whole river, and it has it where it connects at the Nanayoke Creek, is it? And the Tractor Supply.
That is absolutely, I have no idea what that means, but I don't doubt that that's what Google's telling you. So the Susquehanna River begins in Cooperstown, New York, which is best known as like the birthplace of baseball. I'm
scrolling up to get to Cooperstown, to the beginning of this.
And then, but we're going to go back to the map, and then it goes through Pennsylvania, and it goes through Maryland, and then it changes forms into something which geologists name as a ria, and it's when a part of a river valley, the lower river valley, floods, and what it became is a mixture of fresh water and seawater from the Atlantic Ocean, and that is known as the Chesapeake Bay. But it's the Susquehanna River. You can still see the channels beneath in their satellite images beneath the water. Like it's the Chesapeake Bay is 12,000 years old, and the Susquehanna River is estimated to be about 300 million years old.
Wow.
Versus, like, let's say, like the Nile, which might be 70 million years old, or the Colorado, which might be 25 million years old. These are made up numbers. Like, they have reasons why, like, we can estimate it so old, is because the Appalachians are thought of to be, if not one of the oldest known mountain chains on the earth, and the Susquehanna River goes through it. And so what we know is that water follows the path of least resistance. And so if you see a river going through a mountain chain, you know that the river predates it. Like, go look at the Amazon relative to the Andes, and you'll see that there's a 90-degree turn. Because because that is the water turning. Like, oh, look, there's some mountains. I'm not going to go and push my way upstream and through it. But if the water is there prior to, then the mountains move around it. So that's like one of the ways in which, like, they guesstimate the ages, regardless if it's just like, like a title or not. Like, this realm, this physical realm, we know that the oldest holds great influence on the youngest. Like, you as an individual, your earliest experiences, your developmental times are more influential on you on a personality level than, like, later on, because the later on ones are built upon the older. In a traditional human culture, like the human beings in that culture with the most amount of experience are held in the highest regard, because just from the fact that they've seen more, they know more. Like, we know that we can look throughout our ecosystems about, like, what the oldest does. So if we could just kind of hold that truth as it relates to, like, okay, well, whatever flowing water is, like, let's not like collapse the realm of possibilities of what, quote unquote, a river is. We just know it's natural flowing water on this realm which we're living on. This, they're telling us, is the oldest. And this one we see is the birthplace of all of these things, like computers and globalism, the United States and baseball and all this sort of stuff. And then we recognize that it's identified on a map, because that's what we're going to go and see. We're going to go back to the map. Then you start to hold this curiosity, like, what is happening in this part of the world? Why is it important?
Wow.
So that being said, let's go back to the map. Can you pull up that map again?
Okay, I got my map, and I actually just was, while you were talking, I was following. Boy, is that a windy river.
It is the windiest of rivers. It is wide, but we don't know what it is because it's so dammed up. Like, literally, they dammed it.
That's an interesting thing that you're saying, because it's I could see where I got it right now. I'm up looking around Binghamton, New York, and seeing where it comes. But boy, it does go all over, and then something else empties into it, and then it seems to split in two and come back. It's just fascinating. Okay, so I'm on the map.
Okay, so are you looking at Binghamton?
Yes.
Okay, so if you're looking at Binghamton, if you are going, like, on that same sort of line, you're going to the right or you're going east, like, if you however you're going to go.
Yeah, it goes. It looks like it runs across the Freeway 11. Yes, it runs.
Do you see where the river dips down from New York State for a little bit and goes into Pennsylvania State and then comes back up to New York? Okay, if you go zoom in on that area, which is like that low point where it's in Pennsylvania.
Okay, the lowest point it looks like that I'm seeing right now is it looks like it's Oakland. It goes down to Great Bend. Yes.
So, but the part that part where, going back to your comment about Joseph Smith, who is known as the founder of the Church of Latter-day Saints, if you are familiar with that history, there is something it's known as the Restoration Site. And within the history of the Church of Latter-day Saints, Joseph Smith, their founder, had received divine guidance to go, and he was visited by John the Baptist, and he was what would the language be? He was told to go and start what we now think of as the Church of Latter-day Saints, and he was given the responsibility. And so that's why it's called the Restoration Site, because that happened somewhere, and that happened right in the Susquehanna River, right at that location.
Wow. Okay.
Like, and you can go there. Like, I'm not a Mormon. Like, I'm not a member of that church, but they have like this huge, beautiful, like, area where anyone could go to. It's like in the middle of nowhere, Pennsylvania. Like, unless you're going there or live there, like, you would have no idea it exists. And you could go, and they've like purchased all the land, and they've like saved all of the or rebuilt the remnants of the buildings where Joseph Smith lived. Like, whatever that is, like, you as an individual, you meet that however you want to meet that, because I'm meeting that however I want to meet that. But whatever that is, like, I'm excited to take that walk
Mm.
and to go in that place. But that is like part of the mystique. Like, why is that tied into this river? And no one
Right.
knows about it. Thomas Edison, if you go and you look, let's go and scroll out a little bit, and you could look at the river. It
Okay.
kind of has the shape of a Y. Can you see where the big branches come together?
Yes, I'm looking at what area, sort of where you're talking. Are you
It would be in Pennsylvania. You could look where it says Sunbury.
Sunbury? Okay, hold on. We go back up. Boy, it almost gives you a little bit of a headache following this. Okay. I think I got. Wait, still at Great Bend and Halstead.
All right. You're going to
Okay.
have to move it somehow. I'm not certain how to tell you to do that.
Okay. Again. Okay. All right. I'll keep looking. Again, and now there's
But at the place, all I wanted to say was there's a place on this river, the oldest river, where we're beginning to see all of these firsts. There is a primary confluence. It's known as the West Branch, the North Branch, and they call it the Lower Susquehanna. So again, like, we get into this. Part of the naming sequence is we think of things like, oh, this is a river, this is the North Branch, this is a this and a that. If we can free ourselves from like labeling it as something and just recognize, like, okay, this, like, yes, it's like what we think of as a river, but not close down all possibilities, we might begin to appreciate what we're witnessing before us. So at that main confluence where these three main branches meet, historically, what we are told, this is where Thomas Edison built his first power plant, where he used the three-wire distribution of electricity, positive, negative, and middle, bringing from a power plant to a separate building. That happened in Sunbury, Pennsylvania, where the three branches come together, like the first, like, electrical distribution. And we're beginning to see there is, if you will, at the very least,
got it.
a perfect resonance in terms of what you see on the material plane and what we have in our cultural history plane, our timeline of firsts. And then you're beginning to recognize this mystery, which is hiding in plain sight.
Wow.
So
I'm on Sunbury.
You see that Y? You see how it looks like a Y?
Mm-hmm.
It looks like three things coming together.
Yes. Yes, got it.
And that is where the three-wire distribution of electricity was introduced to the world.
Wow.
On the oldest river. And so this is where it gets really kind of interesting is, how familiar are you with the Theosophical Society?
Not that much. Give us a good thumbnail sketch.
Well, let me say some names. Tell me if these names sound familiar.
Okay.
Like H.P. Blavatsky.
No, I would remember that as a Rontowski and a Bilbowski.
So H.P. Blavatsky, she was content. So her story goes something like this. If you listen to my language, the reason I say things like her story goes is because, like, I don't know if this is true or not. I don't know if this is fairy tale or if this is actual, but all I know is this is the story which the history books tell me. So I try to meet things as they are. So the story of H.P. Blavatsky goes like this. She was kind of like the Paris Hilton of her time in the 1880s. Like, and that turn of a phrase was probably more contemporary for early 2000s. Maybe that's a little bit dated right now. But what it means is she was very well known, and no one knew why she was well known. And she kind of had like a socialite sort of connotation. But at the same time, she was like a wild girl. So her wild girlness was this. So she's coming out of Russia. And she's like a mystic's mystic. and she was the founder of something which we now know of, or what was called the Theosophical Society. And the Theosophical Society was like, if you were to go and read, like, what Theosophical Society taught in that, like, really from the 1880s to the 1920s, because it went through a couple different iterations. It would be like, oh yeah, this is every like modern mystical new age woo woo bookstore, like every book in there, like their ideas come from here. Like this is when those ideas were introduced.
Yes, I did something on the Fox sisters, and it's almost unbelievable how we are paralleled. We think we're all this is new stuff, and we're really breaking ground, and it's all already been there.
It's already been there. And this is where it came from in our history. It came from that. It came from, if you like, another vehicle. If you could look at it this way, like, I'm not saying negative or positive. Each person gets to make that distinction themselves if they choose to go down that path. But what you can say for certain, like, if you look at the history which you're given, if you look at these ideas which we are meant to consume without question, you'd be like, well, when were they introduced? Like the history which we're given, they were introduced through a variety of vehicles, and you decide whatever you want to think about that vehicle. You could say that vehicle is like a divinely like tuned vehicle which introduced the idea, or you could say this vehicle is a diabolical vehicle to like I don't know. Like I love this question. The best question you ask yourself is the universe a friendly or dangerous place? Because at the end of the day, like, how you're going to answer this question is going to be answering that. So where I'm going with this is the vehicles where so much of our modern ideas come from are the Theosophical Society, the Golden Dawn. Like, if we look at names like Aleister Crowley, if we look at names like what are the names with the Golden Dawn? Like the Rider deck, like the Tarot Rider deck, like all of these Enochian magic, like all of these like concepts, they come through these vehicles. Like that, like those three which I just named are Golden Dawn, and then the Theosophical Society, which is seemingly separate, but they came about like in the same timeline, like they go hand in glove. So that being said, the Theosophical Society, I'll say this, its fingerprint is all over the Susquehanna River. And so you meet that, you as an individual, you as a person who's listening to this, like if I was sitting like on the other side of this conversation, if I had like headphones on and I was listening to some dude like telling me this, and everything you can go see is verifiable. You could go in and see what I'm saying. Like, I would have like some sort of question, or like I would be concerned if he's trying to give me a way to go and interpret this story. What I'm doing is I'm sharing the data points as much as we can, so that each of us, because we've already gone through it. That's what the last 2 years were. Like, now we get to go and interpret what we have. And what we have is a smoking gun, if you will, of data points and information of this Susquehanna River. And this isn't the only one, but it is at a fundamental level for our culture. And we get to decide what we do with this information now that we find ourselves on the other side of the threshold of what the last 3 years have been, or 2 years, however long it's been.
Okay. So, all right. I don't want to interrupt, but I want to say, keep going. So what you're finding are all these connection points on this river to mysticism or mystical things, or literally inventions of, is that correct? Have I recapped that well?
So yes, no, I love how you're doing this. This is so good, because I have a tendency to speak a certain way, and it's nice for a third person, like, for yourself to kind of like to like simplify it, because you're absolutely right. Yes, you nailed it. That's exactly right. But how I need it, and that's all it is the way I see it, having like swung in this waters, like these waters have like pulled me into its vortex, and now I've been on the other side, and I can explain what that means in a moment. What it does is, when you say mysticism, to me, what it does is it pulls you into the mystery. Like you see mystical groups, you see things where you're not going to be able to understand or explain. That's the definition of what mystery means.
Right.
It doesn't necessarily mean like you solve it. It means that you recognize it. So what at least the conclusion which I've made, or there's two parts. There's one is a recognition of the circumstance, and the circumstance is the awareness of like, the mystery of just the human experience of being alive, and that aliveness connected to a body, and the body standing on solid ground, and that solid ground was sky above. Like before you could take it any further, that's a friggin' mystery. Like there are lots of answers, but it's a mystery. All of them require like some degree of like, okay, I'm gonna have to take you on your word for it. But if you were to come and just like sit in that presence of like, I don't need to solve it, that you are standing on a precipice, right? By looking at the mystery of the Susquehanna River. All signs point to that on a fundamental level. And why I say fundamental is because it's filled with firsts within our contemporary culture. And we know that that is significant. Now, the second part of it is just that, is a recognition that, okay, well, what does that mean to be able to go to the level of firsts? Like another way of thinking about it is like when we say like, that's really deep, we're coming to a fundamental level. And when you're going to a deeper level, it's like its influence is like, it's a much greater influence, but it's not as sharp.
And that I want to ask it. This is a very theoretical question, a very you don't have to back it up. Obviously, like you said, it's where you meet things. Because I am fascinated with, and Pennsylvania pretty much like that too, but more so upstate New York, with what I am sort of calling you could say mystical lands, or I don't want to say magic lands. So do you think, I'm going to give you a chicken or an egg, as people are around this river, do they become inspired? How, like, give me a magical phrase on this.
So that's a fantastic question. I may answer it a little bit different than you're asking, but I'm answering your question. So the way which I would look at it is like, first is a recognition that there's no separation from like the human being from where we find ourselves living. Like, what we'll call the earth. Mm-hmm. Like, like the idea, the concept of like, there's us as humans, and then there's the earth where it's the separate thing which we need to go and study. Like, oh, look how separate it is. I don't approach it from that perspective. I approach it the other way. Look, it's integrated. We're just able to, like, we have the conscious awareness where we can see and experience the separation more clearly and articulate it. So wherever you find yourself on earth, you like every part of what we call earth has a quality. Every part of your human body has a quality. And so the idea of competition or something like that, we've been conditioned to see the world in an unconscious way that way. So like a lot of times, and I heard you kind of make reference to it, like people feel like no, it's an understanding. Like you're think about your body. Like your eyes are not in competition with your hands. You're not like saying like, my hands are so friggin' awesome because they could do so many things. They're so much better than my eyes. You're like, no, it's understanding like the uniqueness and how they work together. So it is from that perspective. So the question is, what is, there are infinite ways of being able to understand, our environment where we're having this sort of experience. And to me, I think that's immensely significant because we're intimately connected. So the more we could understand that landscape sort of energy, the more we can understand kind of like our experience ourselves and how it's connected. Like it's, it ultimately becomes very personal. I say this a lot, like it's got to be personal. You got to like get something out of it. So that's like kind of built into it. So all of that being said, you use the phrase, you use the word in the beginning of our conversation, like, the power, this is the most powerful spot. And I wanted to jump in and ask some questions because I want to clarify it. But what I wasn't telling you is like, because I think that, again, this is not in competition. this spot has an immense amount of power, and I say that with a lowercase p and with like a question quotation marks around it, because we need to really look at what we're saying, what power means. Maybe influence might be the right word, and that's why, like, to me, the reason why I say that, the conclusion isn't just something so subjective as like a feeling sense, but like a demonstratable sense. And to me, that is the relationship between like what we think of global trends and world firsts upon this region. It has to do with influence. And so we can go and look at our cultural stories, our histories of what have taken place upon that landscape, and we can get a better sense of the quality of the energy of that land. Chicken and egg, I think there's a definite link. There is a link between your inner world and the outer world. That's the nature of the construct of consciousness for you, for me, for everyone, that like the inner world and the outer world. So all cultures are going to have their collective inner world, which connect to the outer world, which is where they have that connect their life experience, so the land they live upon. So yes, there's a link, and it's a feedback loop, and it's a dance that goes back and forth. But ultimately, it is the land that is the greater, that is what stays around. That is the real dance, So to me, it's like that is where it begins in that particular dance. And we can go and look at the histories that have happened in, the histories we're told and we know about that have happened upon this landscape. And the histories do include the geography or the earth sciences, which we can look at. That's all part of it as well. And we can begin to see this region, which to me really goes from like that what we would call New York State. I would include like where the Finger Lakes are and like the Adder, like that whole area, like get out like the modern border sense of like that's New York and this is Canada and this is whatever, and just think about that as a region as compared to like the Southwest. Like this is a region, and that region has a real it's got baggage like nobody's business. It's got some friggin' baggage, and that's what you're sensing. You're sensing friggin' baggage, and that's what I think most people of us are feeling, because we live in a baggage world. That's our emotional body, and so we pick up the baggage, but it goes much, much, much friggin' deeper. And our geologist friends will like tell us about it. They'll be like, this part of the world is the only part you could still access Pangea.
Okay, and hold on one second. I'm going to take a break and come back, and then we won't have to worry about another break. Okay, hold on one second, folks.
Hi, my name is Ashley, and Prithvika is my collection of consciously created crystal and nature-forged jewelry. Prithvika translates to of the earth in Hindi, which represents the natural earth-made materials I'm working with, along with my personal ancestry and grounded energy. Each piece is created through ceremony and science and completed with being Reiki charged. I'm currently featuring copper mirror necklaces, which can be used for protection and mirror magic. My intention is for your new piece of jewelry to feel like an extension of self, to help bring your desires to fruition and to amplify the magic within you. My Instagram is @Prithvika, and my website is prithvika.com. That's PRTHVEEKA.com.
Okay, so I love how you describe that as baggage, and I'm going to break this down a little bit because, like you said, chicken or egg. And I'm going to do this in my paranormal Karen terms, which might be a little mystical or
you never have to explain yourself to me.
Okay. This is some of the most haunted land I have ever been on, and it's a repetitive. It's like you can't. If I want to say to you, it was the Underground Railroad. That's one thing, and then it's the Utica mob, and then it's the so this whole area. It's almost like this is going to sound, it's almost like if you go to another place and you're not really thinking about the next dimension, you're not thinking about ghosts, you're not thinking about things that are around you, you're just living in your 3D world. You come here, I believe it's unavoidable, as though it's a thinner layer. Does that make any sense?
It makes absolute complete sense. And I will say from my own experience that I came to the exact same conclusions and had, without a doubt.
Okay. Wow. Okay. This is why I love that you did this, because I have been I'm just fascinated with how much unravels here, of how much another thing. And I also feel like this makes people out here crazy. I don't know about Pennsylvania, but up here in New York, the amount of strange true crime, as though people are under some sort of weird other influence, is just astronomical.
Yes. And we'll use the word baggage, and we'll use, again, and this is for complex reasons. And what complex reasons mean is it's not one simple answer. You can't say, well, it's because of this. It's because of this mixture of you could say that there was an original wounding. I'm open to that idea. There could be original point of cause, or original of why this has taken such root here. But regardless, if we're going to be honest with ourselves, and looking at the environment, you have to say, this has become so complex with so many things that grew out of that, and then things that grew off of that, that if you actually want to go and unravel, and you can't, it's just too, it's all you could say is this is an intense place to kind of be human.
Yes.
This is an intense place to be human as the way we are allowed to express our humanness at this junction of reality.
Yes, and it can be, and I'm just going to say, this is where it just sort of extends into anything paranormal, whether you're talking crypto creatures, which are plenty out here, and strange stories, or mystical, like you said, people inventing things, mystical things like that. Have you had experiences on this river that are that you have? I have no explanation for that, or I've never seen that before, or what are your experiences with that?
All right, that's a good question.
Because I love how you approach things, and you do take that. I will accept your type of skepticism 100%, whereas other people just seem to, like I said, say a no. So you keep looking, you keep finding this on top of this, on top of this, and what happens where you're really that's just magical? That I can't explain.
Right. So I'm gonna take a step back, because. And I appreciate you affording me the opportunity to explain this, because it's fun to hear the story, and we're telling the story. But
yes.
It's very important to understand also the construct, the mechanics behind it. So going back to this idea that this is the human experience at its most fundamental level is a mystery. There's no way you can get out of that and say if tomorrow you'd get a secret email that says just to you, and it's okay, this is the real truth, this is what's really going on, and you read it, you're not going to change, you're going to be that doesn't really do anything, this really is a simulation, and all that other stuff is just made up, you, unless that whatever you internalize, whatever you identify with, that's the only way reality changes, and that's a factual description of what the human condition in this realm is. That's how consciousness works. And so what that means is this mystery is not meant to be solved. Mm-hmm. Now, we have an unending possibility of ways of answering that mystery. That could be scientific, that could be religious, that could be philosophical. There are all these ways which all try to answer this question. But all of them, you can identify, you as an individual can identify with any one of them. And when you identify it, it becomes your truth. And how reality works is, well, then you will go and prove to yourself that that's true until you can see that someone else was proved something else, and it starts to fall apart. But the mystic, this is what mysticism means, is the mystic is like, I ain't trying to solve nothing. I just recognize it's a mystery. So the difference between the mystic and the other person is this: because you're never told that it's okay to just accept the mystery, you don't have to solve it. There's another part of the human condition, which is we are always looking for one thing, and that's called stability. It's called stability. And if our fundamental question cannot be answered, the mysteries, like where are we, how did we get here, what are we supposed to do, all of that, there is on a certain level no stability. Because we're like, we can't answer that. So we naturally go and find stability out there, whether that's through like an idea or a religion. This answers the question. Now I have stability, or a person, or whatever. These are known as identifications. Like when that happens to us, and we're kind of like the condition of our consciousness, we naturally do that. We go and we're like, okay, now I find my stability. This is why like people will go to such long ends to continue to believe what is obvious to everyone else to be a lie, is because you're working on the level of their stability. And they're like, I can't let this collapse because I'm so friggin' afraid of like it falling, because the most basic level. So that is the part of the nature of our experience. And so much of our like alternative thought, because there's a very predictable resistance, generational resistance. They start to like push away from the previous generation's false reality. They're like, that's not true, and I'm going to go to something else. And that has been captured time and time again. So what you said to me a moment ago about like so many people who want to go and accept and believe, they're just thirsty, they're wanting it. Well, that comes from that natural, like, I need some stability. So this is where it all comes to, and this is where this approach and the way I try to frame things up comes from. It comes from an idea of like the most stable thing we really, really know is really what we can sense and tell with like our five lower senses. That's not to say there aren't five higher senses. It's like, let's begin with the most stable. And then from there, we begin to build out. And that's how but we never lose fact that it's a mystery.
Right.
And we embrace it. And that is what this technique is a recognition from my own experience and my own study and my own intuitive knowing and my own way of just like knowing how I would want to be interacted with.
Okay.
And then to go and see like this is the way which information is meant to be shared.
Okay, because I feel like I'm sure you've had a ton of mystical experiences. I kind of feel like this is my interpretation as a tarot reader and whatever. This is my foundation. I feel like telepathically or instinctively, you did connect with this river, and you do get more information than you probably even know.
So okay, yes. So 100%. But if you want to know about Mike's experience, like what's it like to be Mike, I think that's how my life is always. Like I do not separate that. I don't think that experience needs to be named. I'm like I don't say like I breathed 7,472 times yesterday. It's like that's part of the experience of just being human and alive. Like what you described, 100% accurate. 100% accurate, and I'm 100% aware of it. But I also see it as the most natural, normal thing, not just for me, but to be human and interacting with the realm. Everything which I try to do is ultimately about understanding how we, like both me as an individual, but then also as my role as a teacher, is like teach people like how this is a skill to interact with reality.
Mm-hmm.
And this is, and you understanding whys, and realistically, like, this is the time for it. Like, this is literally happening in our realm. Like, never before has everyone been ready to be like, okay, I gotta, like, this shit's fucked up. I gotta start to see things from a new way. Like, you know, it is a now is people are so hungry to see something from a new perspective, but from a way where they're like, I need more proof than before, because all of my trusted sources have turned out not to be trusted, and I've seen that.
And yet they want to believe in magic right now. Because
they I would say this: they don't want to believe in what they were told before, and they are open. People are open in general to new ideas, but then that's also like there's a vulnerability there too.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you know, there's like a that is happening too, which goes back to what I was saying to you before of like, I want to explain this in the most logical way imaginable, because, you know, this is a group activity. You know, if you haven't figured this out, like on one level, this is a completely like individual journey. You know, you're born alone, you die alone. That's totally true. But then at the same time, at least as it relates to culture, and what I mean by that is like how we collectively agree to live together. You know, that is a group activity. And so it is in everyone's best interest that we all kind of like understand like fundamental levels of how we work together, because those truths, like of how human beings work, you know, they've been used against humanity for a very long time. And so like, but now's an opportunity where everyone gets to see, you know, it's like the Scooby-Doo episode. Like now it should be more clear now than ever before.
Mm-hmm. Wow. Okay. So I'm going to loop this back a little bit paranormally. So you live you still live in that same spot right next to the river, correct?
Incorrect.
Oh, where do you live now?
I live in southern Lancaster County at a place called Nome Countryside.
Oh, what was interested in moving there?
Life pulled me there. I encourage people to go, and like, it's a place. It's called Nome Countryside, like the little people, GNOME. Type in Nome Countryside, Pennsylvania, and go look there. So life pulled me living there. It's not normally a place where people live, but circumstances have pulled me in this really, really interesting life way. But the short answer to your question is no, I no longer live it was Marietta, Pennsylvania is where I was living.
Okay. All right. So, but do tell us, when you were living there, what are some of the mystical things that happened? Like, were you seeing spirits? Were you just getting information? Like, what was going on?
So that's always my life. I've asked myself these questions for as long as I've been alive, that it has occurred to me that I'm unable to see a difference between a spirit and a regular person, because everything just seems normal. Like, on one hand, there is nothing that seems strange. Like, I personally do not subscribe to paranormal, because I think that implies that that's not how life is. Like, right. What other people call paranormal, I call regular.
Normal, yes.
And so, like, so that being said, like, so I'm gonna frame it this way, because I think it answers your question. Like, was Marietta weird? Did you have weird experiences? And the answer is like, yes, with a capital YES.
Okay.
Like, you know, so and so there's some places in the town I live. Like, if you were to buy a book, like, you know, the 10 most haunted places in Lancaster County. Lancaster County is one of those, like, you know, quote unquote haunted places. You'll see like 3 places in Marietta, the small little town on the river. And so it was very paranormal. As I said, like, you know, this is going to sound crazy. So
Please, this can't be taken.
So I can't. So I say that because if this is taken out of context and then played, be like, wow, that dude's nuts. But so I lived in this. I didn't want to go to the place. Hold on for once.
Okay, yeah, we got a little windy there. Go ahead. Okay.
So I did not. I was going through a divorce. It's like I don't know, like 9 years ago, and I didn't want to move to Marietta. I was familiar with Marietta, but there was a bunch of personal things that were happening in life, which had me kind of linked to Marietta. And as I said, I was going through some like personal stuff, and I was away from my boys. Like I was much further away than like my sons than I had ever been before. And like I need to get back, and Marietta would have allowed me to do that. So my now ex-wife, she said, like, listen, there's an apartment in Marietta, which I think would be really good. And it'd be like across the street from the boys and blah, blah, blah. And I already am coming into it. Me and her, it was amicable, and it's more than amicable now, for those who are curious on that level. So I was like, all right, like I didn't want to, but I've always surrendered to the flow of life in certain ways very easily. And this would be an example of me surrendering to the flow of life. And I go and I see the building on the outside. I'm already kind of biased. Like I'm like, I'm at a tough point in life. I'm a little bit bitter right now. I'm a little bit whatever. And I'm like, I'm never going to live in Marietta. And I go and I look at this building. I'm thinking, I'm not going to go and live in this building because it looks all like, it didn't look inviting. It looked like what you would think it would be a haunted building. Mm-hmm. And I walk inside, and I'm very, very, very sensitive to my environment. Like, to your point, you're saying, like, are you receiving messages? Like, yeah, all the time. That's why I'm so freaking sensitive to my environment, And to me, things have to be visually appealing, whatever that may mean. And so both in a natural setting and even like in an artificial setting, like in a building. And it was just like, I go inside this building, and the ceilings were low, and it just like, it looked really kind of like, it was a walk up, and I'm like, ugh. And I walk up the steps, and I have this attitude. And then the guy who showed me the place, who opens up the door, and I step inside, and the place was like fantastic. It was like 12-foot ceilings with like huge windows, and it was spacious, and it was like unbelievably perfect. Like it was so perfect. And it had this like outer shell, which was really like unappealing. And I'm really good at like both being lost in like my own story, but then being able to jump out of it and laugh at myself. So like I tell this story like making fun of myself, but it was kind of true. Like, I can see that now. Like I had like a bad attitude, but I quickly jumped out of it when I saw what it was. And I like, okay, life, you got me again. You always have my back. And so that was an example. So the question is like, how crazy? So it was right away. It was in the first month that the whole Susquehanna mystery, that's what we're talking about, like began for me. And like I immediately got wrapped up in it. And it was literally the month my Uranus opposition went direct, and like all of these different things. And I knew it was like a really, really like kind of mystical time. And people would come, like people came, and they would have like, I would do starboard sessions for them. And like, it was like, I wouldn't quite say a revolving door, but there was a lot of people coming through. And then it occurs to me one day, like, because Marietta is known as a haunted place. I'm in a known haunted building. I'm in a building that it was well over 100 years old, and was known to be a mortuary at some point, and like all sorts of like,
all the pieces of a perfect
all of
haunting.
the pieces. And then I was like, And I was telling my sons about like the movie The Sixth Sense. So I have the Sixth Sense in my mind, and I'm like, what if I'm the ghost? and I start thinking about this building. I'm like, you know what? Like this would be a perfect haunted building, and maybe I'm just visiting these people. I'm visiting them. Like I'm like Beetlejuice somehow.
Yes.
So like I don't. So to the question of like strangeness, like I'm always open and playful with it. I don't know. Like I mean, who knows? Maybe that's happening right now. But I had those thoughts when I lived in Marietta. I was open to that idea, playfully.
Well, and I will say this, and this has been fantastic. So thank you for coming out. It's Pennsylvania, because I do go at things from the paranormal. But Pennsylvania is another one that is just beyond historic, haunted, strange, dark. All those things. But I will say, I cannot tell you how much I appreciate this particular podcast of what you're talking about, because I'll tell you, I had no intention of moving to Utica, New York. I can't wait to get out. But I was like, this is not like any other place I've been. And exactly what you're talking about here with this river just sort of confirms exactly what I was thinking.
Without a doubt, I did a whole bunch of so I encourage everyone, if you're listening to this, to one of the first things you need to like, which is helpful to really appreciate the full depth of what we're talking about, is erase out of your mind state borders and think about it in terms of like regions. And so, like, what you're calling Pennsylvania and New York, it's the same area. And so, like, yeah, maybe like since the state level, they're like histories that are different. But think about it like maybe barriers by natural geographic like demarcations, like rivers or mountain chains. But that area is, I find, if you really want to get into like modern culture, like I'll tell you this one last thing, which conclusion, which I made about the region, and then I think I'm going to have to wrap up. It's the significance of Scranton, Pennsylvania, which is also part of the region. Okay, and so the things which I found interesting, there was I don't know if you're familiar with Philip K. Dick as a science fiction author, but he was like popular, I think, like maybe in the 60s or 70s. In that small niche, and since then, like a lot of his short stories are the basis of some of the most famous or well-known Hollywood sci-fi films. And one of his books, it became an Amazon TV show. It was a series. It was The Man in the High Castle. It just had this small little tidbit about Scranton, Pennsylvania. And what they said in that TV show was that beneath Scranton, Pennsylvania, was a place where the fabric of space-time was thinner and they were able to go between dimensions. The Nazis were. That's the idea. So like whatever that means. But what's true is beneath Scranton, Pennsylvania is the world's largest concentration of anthracite, which is, we could talk about that in a second. And it makes up 98% of the planet's. I mean, again, that's what they tell us, but like it's the majority of this one material, anthracite.
What is anthracite?
Anthracite is imagine a rock that if you were to catch it on fire, that you could catch on fire, because most rocks, like 99.99% of rocks, don't catch on fire, and when you catch on fire, there is no smoke, so it's a smokeless burning rock.
You have that city out there in Pennsylvania that's all on fire underneath.
Well, exactly. So I was being a little bit silly. I was describing coal. Okay.
Oh.
so as soon as you hear the word coal, you have in your mind what you think coal is. Everyone does. That's how the mind magic works. What I described was an accurate description of what anthracite is. Anthracite's the only thing on the planet, only rock on the planet, which catches on fire and it has no smoke. So it's a type of coal that is which is difficult to burn, and it's smokeless. Like it's not the real dirty type of sooty coal, which we think of like nowadays from like Pittsburgh. And what coal is, and what they tell us, is it's more or less fossilized swamps, like swamp plant matter. So maybe it's not technically a rock, but nonetheless, it looks like it. So anthracite, if you could begin to look at the natural world from a lens of it has an archetypical energy and quality, and we can understand that by looking at its attributes, as opposed to saying like, oh, that's what this is. This is a fuel source. This is however we've been taught to look at things. Well, then you could begin to understand the energy of an area. And so when you go and you see something as unique as anthracite, and like everything it represents, like on the fire element and the earth element and the rareness and the concentration, like that's to me like indication, like whether or not it's a interdimensional portal for Nazis or not, I don't know. But what I do know is the landscape there has some very, very undeniable, unique properties, which are all about like underground and like everything that you could think of, like what coal might even represent. And then we think about the histories, and we have some clue as to like what has happened on that land, and we could see it also in like pop culture that's known as synchromysticism. So the whole region is on a like it's just it has built into it like a magnetism which is going to create and hold and store like baggage, like we said. And that's why, and like when we have people on it nowadays and no one knows about it, no one's talking about it, like it's like anything that has been avoided and thrusted into the subconscious, it's going to show itself in like projected unhealthy ways. That's the way our psychology works individually. And so collectively, the same thing would happen because people don't talk like what you and I are talking about. It's all like pushed aside. We don't talk about how this is in the land and like how. And so it's just going to show itself in these very unhealthy, like unexplainable, strange ways, like what you were saying. There's one last resource, which could be a really good resource for folks. It's a book called The Gaia Matrix. And it's written by Peter Shampoo, not spelled like what you do with your hair, but like it's spelled like a French word, like kind of how champagne is spelled. He goes into great detail explaining the Northeast from an energy perspective and a geometry perspective way, which is different than what I just explained, but I think it's also very complementary. And I think that book, for anyone who's listening, who is interested in like this topic of like the landscape energies of this region, which includes New York and New England and so forth, that would be a great resource because I've never seen anything like it out there. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Michael. All right, tell everyone where they can find you.
They can find me Susquehanna Alchemy. That's usually like the brand which I'm associated with it. So if you look on Instagram or like susquehannaalchemy.com, those are probably the best ways to find me. YouTube, there's a lot. That's probably where the most amount of my information can be found if you want to see some of my past presentations and so forth.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much. You made me feel so much better about this horrible land I live in. No, I'm just kidding.
We're just kidding because, yeah, exactly. But yes, you have a much better appreciation of where life pulled you, don't you?
Yes, I do. I knew something was up, and now I keep looking at it, and it just gets better and better. Well,
okay. So I'm going to say this one thing because I don't, from my lens, the way I see life and see individuals and so forth, there is no separation from like, you and your life experience and so forth. So if you got pulled to this place at this particular time and like you're trying to go and make sense of it. And then if you look at like the skills that you naturally bring to in reality, so that being like a comedian, and so that's going to be an approach, like there is something intimately part of the seed impulse of life that brought you to this place, which includes your natural abilities. So like what you naturally bring is going to be part of what you're unearthing.
Fantastic.
So which to me, yes.
Yes, thank you. Like I said, I'm doing that subset podcast on my Patreon, and there's so much here. It's beyond. It is so fascinating. Like I said, it wouldn't be the place I would move to, but it has definitely a plethora of information and so much to pull from. So I know I am here for a reason.
Without a doubt.
Well, thank you, Michael.
This was a lot of fun. I didn't know where we were going to go, and I was pleasantly surprised that we went to a lot of fun places.
Yes, and please, you're welcome on my podcast anytime. Anything new coming up, just let me know. And it was just fantastic.
Excellent. I feel the same.
All right.
Until next time, Karen.
Thanks, Michael. All right, everybody. We'll see you next week on Paranormal Karen. Paranormal Karen. She's a spooky kind of queen. Paranormal Karen. She's an angel without wings. Comedian, ghost hunter, conscious exploring. She's a funny gal and a real woo pal. She's Paranormal Karen.